They told you he was a god of thunder, but they didn't tell you what it cost him to become one. Before the lightning, there was a man. Before the power, there was control. And before the legend, there was a moment where everything broke. This is not just the story of Sango. This is what happens when power stops serving a man and starts consuming him. History remembers Sango as more than human, a ruler of Oyo, a force of nature, a name that echoes whenever thunder cracks across the sky. But when you strip away the chants, the myths, the reverence, what remains? Was he truly divine? Or simply a man who wielded power so overwhelming that people had no choice but to call it godhood? The records are fragmented. Oral traditions passed from generation to generation. Stories shaped by belief, by fear, by admiration. In some accounts, Sango commands lightning with absolute authority. In others, that same lightning leaves destruction in its wake. Uncontrolled, devastating, indiscriminate. So which version is true? Did he destroy only his enemies? Or did his power turn inward, consuming even those closest to him? To understand Sango, you have to confront a contradiction. A man yet more than a man. A king yet something beyond a king. He ruled with authority, enforced order, expanded influence. But alongside that authority grew something else. A reputation that stretched beyond politics into the realm of the supernatural. The line between ruler and deity did not just blur. It began to vanish. This is where the questions deepen. Because power, when left unchecked, does not remain static. It evolves. It demands. It isolates. And in Sango's case, it appears to have created two identities that could not coexist peacefully. The king, bound by responsibility, strategy, and consequence, and the god defined by fear, awe, and absolute force. Which one was real, or were they both real and locked in conflict? Accounts describe moments where Sango's actions defy conventional explanation. Displays of force that seem excessive even for a ruler. Punishments that feel less like justice and more like something uncontrollable breaking through. And yet, those same moments are what elevated him. What transformed him. What made people believe they were witnessing something beyond human limitation. But belief is complicated. It can elevate a man and trap him at the same time. Because once a king becomes a god in the eyes of his people, there is no return, no room for weakness, no tolerance for error. Every action must reinforce the myth. Every decision must sustain the illusion of absolute power. And if that illusion begins to fracture, the consequences are not political. They are existential. So we have to ask, was Sango in control of his power, or was his power controlling him? There are whispers within the narrative, subtle, often overlooked, that suggest something was shifting beneath the surface. Moments where the balance tilted, where the force he commanded began to act in ways that could not be easily justified or contained. And when power stops obeying the one who wields it, it ceases to be a tool. It becomes a threat. This brings us to the most unsettling question of all. Why would a king, feared and revered in equal measure, choose to end his own life? This is not a detail that fits neatly into the image of a god. It disrupts it, challenges it, forces a re-examination of everything that came before. Because if Sango was truly divine, then what drove him to that final decision? And if he was not, then what kind of pressure, what kind of internal conflict could push a man of such authority to that point? The answers are not straightforward. They exist somewhere between myth and reality, between reverence and fear. And as we begin to unravel this story, one thing becomes clear. Sango was not just a figure of power. He was a convergence of identities that could not hold together forever. A man who became a myth, a king who was called a god, and somewhere within that transformation, something began to break.
The Rise of Oyo.
Before the thunder had a name, before fear learned to speak in whispers, there was a kingdom rising from the earth with a force that could not be ignored. The Oyo Empire did not emerge quietly. It expanded with intent, with structure, with precision. Across the vast savanna, its presence was unmistakable. Horsemen cutting through open land, drums echoing across distances that carried authority long before soldiers ever arrived. This was not just a kingdom, it was a system, a machine of power built on discipline, strategy, and control. At its core stood a political structure that rivaled the most organized states of its time. The Alafin, the king, was not a distant symbol. He was the center of governance, supported by a network of chiefs, military leaders, and advisors who ensured that authority extended far beyond the palace walls. Decisions made within the royal court did not remain there. They moved outward, shaping the lives of thousands, enforcing order across territories that stretched beyond the horizon. Militarily, Oyo was dominant. Its cavalry was unmatched, a decisive advantage that allowed it to expand rapidly and defend its influence with calculated force. Warfare was not chaotic. It was deliberate. Campaigns were planned. Movements were coordinated. And victory was expected. To stand against Oyo was to confront a power that understood both strength and timing. But Oyo's influence was not built on military force alone. There was another dimension, one that could not be measured in numbers or territory. A spiritual authority that reinforced its dominance. Rituals, beliefs, and divine associations were woven into the fabric of leadership itself. Power was not only exercised, it was justified through forces that transcended the physical world. The king was not merely a ruler of people. He stood at the intersection of the human and the divine. It is within this system that Sango emerges, not as a myth, not yet, as Alafin, as king. His rise to the throne places him at the center of everything Oyo represents: military command, political authority, and spiritual significance. From the beginning, his presence is undeniable. He is not passive. He does not rule from a distance. His leadership is direct, forceful, immediate, and his reputation forms quickly. Fearless. That is the word repeated across accounts. A ruler who does not hesitate. A king who acts with certainty, even when others would pause. In battle, in judgment, in command, there is no visible doubt. Decisions come fast. Actions follow without delay. But alongside that fearlessness, there is something else. Unpredictability. It appears in the way he governs, in the intensity of his responses, in moments where his actions seem to exceed expectation, where the line between calculated authority and something more volatile becomes difficult to define. Those who serve under him obey, but not without awareness. not without caution, because power, when expressed without restraint, creates a different kind of presence. Within the royal court, tension is constant. Advisors speak carefully. Chiefs measure their words. The atmosphere is controlled, but never relaxed. Every decision carries weight not just because of its outcome, but because of how it is delivered. Authority is clear, but so is the possibility of consequence. Outside the palace, the empire continues to thrive. Trade flows, armies move, drums signal unity and strength across the land. To the outside world, Oyo stands as a model of dominance, organized, expansive, unchallenged. But power at that scale is never without complexity, because the same force that builds an empire can also destabilize it, if left unchecked. And in Sango, that force is becoming more visible. There are moments, subtle at first, where his presence shifts from commanding to overwhelming, where his decisions feel less measured, more absolute, where the energy around him changes, difficult to define but impossible to ignore. It is not openly discussed, not directly, but it is understood. The king is different, and difference in a system built on balance introduces risk. The drums continue. The warriors remain loyal. The empire expands. But even in power, something about Sango unsettled his own people.